As we do more ornamental projects, and even in the Hook of the Week projects, I've noticed that I resort to using a bending fork or a scroll wrench, depending on what you want to call it, quite often. And these are really handy tools in the shop for lots of different things. I have several styles. We looked at making this more traditional one, forged out of mild steel at one point. But the ones I tend to use the most are made out of old road grader blades. Now that's these things, and sooner or later they wear out grading the roads, and if you live someplace with dirt roads, they probably go through a fair number of these. And they're just scrap usually. Sometimes you can find them at a scrap yard. Sometimes if you know somebody that operates a road grader or works in the maintenance shop, you might be able to get one. I have never gone looking for a road grader blade. It's just one of those things that people give you from time to time, and I've never needed to go find another one. One road grader blade will make a lot of bending forks, both to use in the vise or the handheld variety, but today let's make one of the handheld ones. Now this is tough stuff. This is hard to work. The first ones of these I made, I cut out primarily with a cutting torch and then ground everything to shape, and they worked okay. The handles were super heavy. I may have drawn one of the handles out by hand, but it was a lot of work. It wasn't until I got a power hammer that I finally finished drawing those handles out and made nice, comfortable, practical handles for use on these. So even though I'm going to start off by hand at the anvil today, I don't guarantee we're going to stay that way. This really is a good project for work under a power hammer, but if you're ambitious, if you're energetic, it can all be done at the anvil. And if you want a little bit easier way to do it, you can go back to the more traditional method made out of mild steel instead of the road grader blade. But these things will last forever. No hardening or tempered required. It's that tough. So to start with, I have a chunk of road grader blade that I cut off. In this case, it's about 3/4 of an inch thick, or about 20 millimeters thick. And I've cut a section that is 6.5 inches long, or 170 millimeters long. And if you look at the profile here, you can see it's got the sharp edge and it's curved in the back. And we need to deal with both of those issues, or we're going to end up folding this over, causing problems. I'm just going to get rid of the sharp edge. You could probably forge it in if you're really patient, but I think it's going to be easier to just cut that off than it is to try and forge that down and keep it from rolling over. And then I'm going to flatten this out so that it's not cupped anymore, because that's going to make it want to fold over this way as you forge the edge, and we're going to have to forge the edge to be able to draw out the handle, because the wrench will pretty much just be right there, and all this section becomes handle. I've got this old adjustable wrench I often use for what I need another scroll wrench for. And this is 1.25 inches inside, and that's what I need to replicate in this one, so that's what my goal is going to be. Now you can certainly cut that sharp edge off just by using an angle grinder with an abrasive blade. I wouldn't cut this with diamond tools or carbide tools because this is hardened steel, and even if you anneal it, it is still really tough. It is formulated to be abrasion resistant. So it's not something that wants to cut very well, but abrasive blades and an angle grinder or chop saw work pretty well. But since not everybody's got that, and since I'm going to try and do as much of this at the anvil as I feel so inclined at the moment, let's go ahead and start this just by cutting that with a chisel. Then I'll grind whatever burr I end up with off of that, and we should end up with a pretty nice piece that we can go to work with. And this is just like any other chisel cutting that we've looked at. Cut right along that ridge so I can get rid of that sharp plow edge. This is going to take a lot of work if we finish it this way, because this is tough material. But we will be able to do it if you've got enough patience. Just a matter of persistence. Okay, that took about 20-25 minutes, including heating time. But we still have a little burr there, and I'm going to let this cool, take it to the big belt grinder, and grind that off. So a little quick hit on the grinder cleans up the edges so that I'm not rolling those over or forging some sort of a burr down into the material. The next thing I want to do is just kind of flatten it out. It's still kind of cupped and bent and things like that, so I want to flatten that out a little bit. Then I will lay out for the actual fork portion, and I'm going to leave full thickness in width, then leave my 1 1/4 gap and leave full thickness again. So it'll end up being about 2 3/4 inches for my teeth, my space between the teeth and the next tooth, and a lot of that will probably get ground down in the long run, but to start with I want to leave it that big just so I'm sure I've got plenty of material. At that point I'll butcher in here, and we will then draw this out, and I'll talk about how I'm going to do that to avoid any kind of cold shuts down in here. But let's get it hot, let's straighten it, and then we'll worry about doing all that stuff. This stage, all I'm really doing is just trying to flatten it out, straighten it a little bit. There'll be a fair amount of back and forth as we work it just to keep it under control, but the better you can start off, the easier it'll be in the long run. This is tough stuff to forge, though. Now this end is a little bit more square, so this is where I'm going to make the fork end. Start with a butcher. I just want to get a good mark right now. Back to the fire. They say this is really tough stuff. who was I trying to kid? I knew this was tougher stuff than I wanted to try and forge completely by hand. Some of you really young, ambitious guys that can swing a heavier hammer than I do might not have so much problem, but there's no reason to kill yourself on it if you have a power hammer available. And if not, you can find other ways to make this same type of tool. But by butchering in and then fullering this, it kind of unfolds this material and makes it way easier to draw this out. I'm going to do a little bit more of that just so I can get rid of this little bit right there. I don't want to actually force a cold shut in there. Now that does most of the heavy work, and it gives me a handle that's really easy to hold on to with a pair of tongs now while I work on this end. The next thing I want to do is I want to put a slot punch in here. Making a big square punch exactly the size that you want your width to be is a good way to go, and then you can chisel cut the sides out. But I don't have a square punch that big. I do have a slot punch that's just a little bit small. So I'm going to put it in here, and I'll probably start back a little bit. And if I need to trim it, I'll trim the front off. That'll be easier to trim in the long run. So we're going to do this, and I'm just going to do that under the power hammer since we're already admitting that that is the most efficient way to do this. And that just gives me the base of my slot. Then we'll still chisel this out. And we'll probably do that at the anvil or the treadle hammer. Quick and easy way to start that slot. I may go back and extend it just a little bit using the same technique. This is just a handheld slot punch that's a little smaller so I can knock the slug out. I think I will go back and use that same punch and just move that forward about a quarter of an inch or so just to get the size slot I want. Remember, all of this is going to get cut out of there, so you don't have to worry about any rag there. Just on this top section is really all we need to worry about. I'm just going to clean that up and straighten it out a little bit, and then we'll take a chisel and we'll cut this. Sometimes a tool like this is a little easier to use. At least to get part way down there. Almost all the way though. This does deform that a little bit, but it's nothing we can't fix. I have too much here and maybe not enough there, so I could have moved my slot over just a little. If anything, that's a little bit bigger than the spacing that I wanted. So I don't want to make it any larger. I think I'll end up trimming that far tine off just a little bit. Now it occurs to me you could almost as easily butcher in both sides of the back tine, draw this out straight, and then bend it over and upset the corner. Might be just as good an approach. Now, this is one of those spots where this square horn on this other anvil is really nice. Also loud. Now these tines should be deep enough for the widest material you're likely to use it on. For me that's about 1.5 inches, and these are right at 1.5 inches. So I think I'm going to try and draw this out just a little bit. You do want them parallel on the inside, so your taper has to all be to the outside. There again, that's a good place for this square horn. I'm not trying to draw it out very far, just another 1/4 inch or so. This anvil is a lot louder. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and finish the handle in now, and then we'll do some grinding on this other end. Oh, good. That's going to be a good fit with the tongs. For the handle, what I really want to do now is I want to spread it widthwise and make it fairly skinny in this dimension, but wide in this dimension, and that gives you a little bit better control when you're working with it. That's all of the serious forging steps. Straighten it out a little bit here. So ended up with a nice long handle, but perhaps the tines are a little thin. But it still will be a good, useful tool that I will be glad to have. And even the thin tines in this grater blade are remarkably strong. The next thing I want to do, after this cools off completely, is grind inside here, clean up any rag, and kind of round up the tines a little bit so it works a little bit smoother. Even air-cooled, this stuff is pretty tough, but you can file it a little bit, and sometimes files get in here better than the grinders do. So the cleaner a forging job you do, the less filing you have to do. When all is said and done, you do want the insides parallel, and it looks like I tip out just a little bit there, so I'm going to heat it back up, forge that. A little twist in the handle we'll fix. Then it'll be done. Set hammer is a nice way to do that if it fits. But if it doesn't fit, you can always find another way to do it. Does this fit over this anvil? Good. We don't have to go to the other anvil now. That looks pretty darn good. Well, we've got some heat here. Let's go ahead and put a touch mark on there. Check it for twist. Got just a little bit in there. That pretty much finishes it. I think I'll put a little wax on it just because I can. Yes, that is a pretty ambitious project, especially if you don't have a power hammer. But I'll tell you what, I've always been pleased with these Road Grader blade bending forks. They are tough material. The fork can be a little bit lighter. For a fork this big, this is probably plenty strong enough. Although, like I said, I might have made the tines a little skinnier than I would have liked. I think if I were to do one with this wide again, I would make the tines heavier. In the past, I've always had the problem making the tines too chunky for the width of the fork. So it's kind of a learning curve thing. I haven't made one of these in a long time, so maybe I'll find time to make a few more and make a whole new set of them, and then I'll have some that really kind of match and go together and are a little less clunky than these old ones are. Now, if you don't have a power hammer, you don't have a treadle hammer, you don't have a striker, you don't have the power tools to saw this out, whatever the case is, that means that this is really just more entertainment than it is practical education today. This other style of bending fork we have done pretty much entirely by hand, and I will link to a video for this fork at the very end of this video. So there's always a couple of video links at the very end. Check there, and I will have this more traditionally forged fork. It's a little lighter, it's mild steel, easier to forge, but it will also be easier to bend the tines on it if you're not being careful. Really, for any of the projects I present, it is up to you to decide at what level can you work on that project. If I'm using a power hammer and you don't have one, all of this can, in theory, be done by hand. It's just a whole lot of work. But if you're 30 years younger than I am and stronger than I am, can swing an 8-pound hammer all day long, you might be able to make one of these all by hand. But it's a lot of work, and like I say, you can make one of these without all of that equipment, so you just have to adjust what you do. And if you're just getting started but you have a welder, you can make these fabricated. You can just take a flat bar, weld a couple of round pins to it. Fast, quick, easy, get back to work. But you'll learn more about blacksmithing when you forge these things than you do when you fabricate them. So if you just need the tool right now, today, fabricate it. If you want to learn a little bit more, want to have a tool that's going to last you the rest of your life, and something that you can really take some pride in, taking the time to forge them and taking the time to forge them out of really tough materials might be worth the time and the effort for you. But we all have different tools, different equipment, different experiences, and let that help guide you in the way you do these things. You don't have to do it exactly the way I do it. I'm just presenting ideas and concepts. And like I say, sometimes the videos are just more entertaining or something to file away for later. Now, I know a lot of you say, I will never own a power hammer, and that may be true for some of you, but I know I used to say I would never own a power hammer, and I didn't go to demonstrations or workshops that featured power hammers. I said, I'll never need that information. I've now had 4 different power hammers in my blacksmithing career, and I really wish I had paid more attention to some of those educational opportunities earlier on. But I think that's enough on this subject. I do hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you give it a thumbs up. If you haven't done so already, I would love it if you hit that subscribe button down there. Feel free to stick around, watch a few of the other videos, share the videos with your friends. If you would like to provide financial support for the videos here at Black Bear Forge, there are links in the video description for both PayPal and Patreon. Those are merely donations. The content is free. In the meantime, I hope you have time in your day to get out to your shop, make something, but stay safe, wear your safety glasses. We'll see you for the next one.